right. Day number two or session number two, man. Jesse, good morning. How are you
Good
doing, buddy?
morning. Yeah, I am feeling much more calm and settled than the last time we talked. I'm not in between anything. I'm sitting at home. The farm's outside. The chickens are clucking. It's a beautiful morning. I'm ready to rock.
I feel like that should be a mantra for life, man. The chickens are clucking. Like, what else do you want to hear in life?
It really does. Yeah, there's a certain aura to it, right? When it's a nice day, it's quiet. And you just got those little noises out in the background. I should be working from the porch, but want to keep everyone focused here on vCISO because that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, we'll give folks a minute or here or so, and we'll start here on time. Thanks
Well,
everyone for joining. All
where
right.
uh, where are you these days? Are you back home? Or are you out and about?
No, I'm in Vancouver this week,
Okay.
but promptly starting, another tour. We'll be at Robin Robbins boot camp
Nice.
next week. Then I actually have another week at home, but May is wild all over the place. Europe, some North America things. June's a little crazy. PAX 8 event comes up in Denver. I'll be out in Tampa actually for a few days with the
Nice.
CyberFox thing. So yeah, man, just continuously
Yeah.
trying to hit the different places and having a ton of fun seeing MSPs everywhere. This I can tell you everywhere I've been, um, the it's obvious that cybersecurity is a priority, but I think the shift in conversation that MSPs are
Mhm.
having with customers about it is really interesting, because it's kind of tied into a bit of the need to get the customer more involved in the conversation overall,
Yeah.
the relationship, the
Yeah.
general MSP relationship, and so it's been really interesting to see how people are kind of figuring out how to do that well.
I
And this is
I want to share real quick. It's funny that you say that. I got a DM yesterday from someone who said that this it started it said vCISO, buddy. Looks like that might be the best positioning. I thought I should go with pen testing, or they're talking about some stacks, and they're like, but it seems like many businesses here are just starting to see the need for a cybersecurity program, right?
mm,
And so that's from an MSP. They're seeing that live on the street.
well. I mean, what a good segue to kind of just quickly recap the stuff we were talking about. By the way, if you're joining this series for the first time, this here is Jesse Miller, the one and only SecOps farmer. Um, I love your intermingling of like running a farm with cybersecurity and SecOps posts. It's just refreshing in many ways I can't describe. It's like that girl on TikTok that does the lip sync voiceovers to the guy with the super heavy Latin American accent. I don't know if you've seen these. They're absolutely hilarious. And you just kind of love them and you don't know why, but you got to have more of it. So
Right.
I got to have more of your farm is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we do it once a week, so yeah, if people want to go check that out, it's the hashtag cybersec farmers on LinkedIn, and you'll see the hijinks we're getting into out here.
The hijinks, indeed. So session one was these two sessions were kind of together, just timeline wise, just as we tried to find 6 slots in the whole year to do this entire series through.
Yeah.
And so we just had these fresh off the top of the last one that we did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the discussion about the series, why we're doing this, trying to be really pragmatic about the approach and the resources and takeaways that we give everybody to work on to try and work through some of this launching a vCISO program internally. Um, Lots of good topics, as you see, just from these couple of slides. And we collected all those resources and we dropped them here at this link. And I'll
Yeah.
put this in the chat so you can grab it as well. In the future additional sessions, as we publish them, we'll drop the resources at that one link, and you're welcome to visit here. And the reason I'm kind of doing it this way is because there will be people that will check out the videos on YouTube. You'll notice a YouTube playlist in there. The videos will just be published, and some people will come across them after the fact and want access to the resources. For you guys, we'll talk about the resources while we're in this actual session, and we'll discuss that as needed throughout the session. So today we're kind of in this topic of developing the hypothesis. Um, we're going to obviously talk about compliance frameworks, not so much to explain them, but really to try and understand how to use the difference between them as part of your go-to-market strategy, and understanding what hypothesis you want to develop to launch your service internally. And then I think most importantly, perhaps understanding where to land on that foundational framework. That's going to
Mhm.
be the kind of the basis of your entire service. Jesse, just high level, because I know with your consulting stuff at Power Grid, people must come across this, juncture of like, well, which one do we choose? Should we go
Right.
CIS? Should we go CMC? Should we go all these things?
Yeah.
And what kind of changes do you see happening between for people as they kind of transition between one thought or the other?
Yeah, I think there is that overwhelming analysis paralysis, and I see a lot of programs in that state where it's like, hey, CMC is a great opportunity. Well, there's a lot to think about there if you're not familiar with that world, right? And we'll get into some of that, but or hey, I hear HIPAA. There's a lot of clients that need compliance for healthcare. Well, let's take a step back and think about our organizational DNA. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into it. But you mentioned something about pragmatist or a pragmatic approach, and that's really I would consider myself an ultimate pragmatist when it comes to this stuff. Like we want to find the easiest, shortest, simplest path to get something that works and is profitable, right? I think the Da Vinci quote is simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, right? And that's what we're going to seek to do today. So to lead into this, when we say develop your hypothesis, I really want to look as we talk about our go to market and kind of our market evaluation today. We're going to use a scientific method to think about that. So I'll let you walk us through the path here, and we'll dive into it. But that's just a little preview of what we're going to get into.
Yeah, so today really we're on this plan section of this development roadmap, and this is, for everybody's benefit, this is the framework that Jesse follows in his Power Grid consulting as well. Um, and if you're new here and wondering like why are we doing this with Jesse, why are we sharing all this resource? The hypothesis from ScalePad's perspective is, we provide a great tool to do all this work with at scale, which is Control Map. But I think there's a lot of help that people need in developing their offering, their service.
Yeah.
A lot of the consistency and help behind the scenes to stay the course. And so this is the part that Jesse is so great at, and that is the system Power Grid is going to help you execute on consistently and longer term. And so we thought it was a great partnership to try and share a lot of these resources together, and that's what brought us here. So we're in this plan section today. We're going to talk about go-to-market. We're going to talk about a little bit about the offer matrix. There's a whole worksheet that Jesse has developed that we'll bring up and we'll talk through as well. And just how to think through some of the resources and logistics you're going to need to actually get this stood up inside of your business as you get ready to put something together. So to get us started and acquainted, I think we were talking a lot about MSPs launching new services. And how often these are rooted in the client's mindset of what outcomes they need, as opposed to what's good for you. What's good for the MSP is, I think, a very MSP centric way of doing it, of course, but it often misses the mark of the value of, or the perception of value for the client. So
Yeah.
let's launch this poll. And I'd love to hear what people think about this, because it'll give us some good background on how to talk through this today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And so for those of you that don't know, I think we talked about this last time, is I was the CISO of an MSP for over a decade. And as we were building cybersecurity programs, I was constantly fighting this, right? Is a customer asks for something and all of a sudden we think that's a good idea. Oh, we should make a service out of this, right? So my would always just kind of, my question would be like, what market research are we basing this off of? And so I think to your point, have we really thought through how this is good for the client? So I'm interested to see these poll results and see what the shift in the spread looks like, because I don't know. I'm interested.
Yeah, well, we'll give folks a few more seconds. I have this memory of, the pandemic hits and everybody suddenly wants to launch a remote worker
Yeah.
network package service, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This was a disaster, I think, when I talked to most people about whatever they did during that time. We just ended up basically under a ton of bricks doing VPN configurations and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then the remote worker service was out the window pretty
Uh,
much immediately. So
I have a good story about that actually. Is we crushed it when that happened because I kind of saw the writing on the wall and I was like, we need to get this SASE thing going right now. So we spun up and I put my team on research for like a next gen SASE ZTNA solution. We spun that up, wrote the marketing for it, had to go to market ready in a few months. And we were just piling customers onto that service and it was very profitable for us. So yes, it can work, but you're right. I think that was something where there's market research and the market's coming at you pretty fast at that point.
yeah. Well, and I think when we try to do these things as the result of like that FOMO of like here's an
Yeah.
opportunity that I'm
Yeah.
missing out.
Yeah.
I think we tend to rush through the exercise and
Mm-hmm.
not realize, and then ultimately the thing fails, or we try to do it too heavily across the board because of
Yes.
standardization and so on. And
Yep.
so that's problematic.
Yep.
All right. So any surprises here in these results,
Uh,
Jesse?
um, I thought we would see some. Never thought about it that way, but it's encouraging to me because it shows that we're starting to make a shift here as and mature as an industry.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting that sometimes is the highest percentage. So I mean, I think that we could all take this as a moment of introspection and be like, maybe we should shift our thinking about this a little bit, right?
Yeah. All right. So good stuff. Let me move this off to the side here and we'll keep going. And this is a quote that you dropped in our sort of prep conversation. And this is true in many cases. It's not
Yeah,
true in all cases, of course. A lot of
yeah.
people do spend the time thinking about this. They're always productizing in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of set up the theme for process, for standards, for all the interesting necessary pieces. But we're seeing,
Yeah.
especially with something like vCISO, where the customer's understanding of the value, how they perceive what they're getting after the fact down the
Mm-hmm.
road, especially because vCISO is not a project, it's a program
Right.
that's going to not have an end. I think the way you think about it, the way you present it is a little bit different than the average QBR project pitch, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting. And I said that in regard mainly to vCISO services because almost without fail, most of the programs that when MSPs come to me, they're having issues with oversubscription on their service, or they're not able to sell it, or they're not able to value position it with their clients, or usually all three of those, right? Which lead down to an oversubscription on service because now we've made concessions and gotten over and offered more than we can actually deliver on just to get the deal done. But that's what I talk about when I'm saying just rolling the dice. It's like we hear that compliance is a new market, or vCISO is a new market. And so, okay, we're going to go do that. But did we really think through? I mean, like I said, there needs to be the scientific method through how we think through our go to market. And that's what we're going to try and educate on today.
Yeah. I'll just quickly tangent a bit on the resilience piece because
Yeah.
I say this often. I think a lot of MSPs have a bit of this VAR hangover, which is, oh, I'll wait until
Yeah.
one of my clients raises their hand and says,
Right.
oh, we need compliance, and then I'll sell it to them.
Right.
And then we come in, we haven't spent the time understanding what the thing feels like, and then it's really
Mm-hmm.
difficult to communicate that back to the client if you haven't gone through it yourselves. And so,
Right.
part of the whole genesis of this project was really getting more MSPs on their own compliance journey because I think that's a super key resilience piece
Agreed.
that's necessary to understand how to do this well for clients. So that also means not getting ahead of your skis in many ways and developing the hypothesis clearly, understanding that all the necessary working parts of it from the internal MSP facing thing are going to be there.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk through some of these today primarily. And Jesse, this is where your expertise of having seen people do this over and over and over again is going to really, I think the nuance of that insight is going to be super important. Um, all right. So, Jeff Spen, thanks for your comment. On the link provided, I see video, but not an option to download the slides. Is there an option to download slides for each webinar as I attend? That same link, it's possible that maybe it's cached or something because we just literally updated it minutes before the webinar. So give it a bit of time. That same link will give you a little form to access the resources after the fact, but that is the
Yeah.
correct link. We'll check on it before the end of the webinar.
Yeah.
All right. So defining the problem or opportunity. I think this is one of those things that we make assumptions about the pain points that clients
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
Um, but talk to me a bit through your experiences here.
Well, so it's interesting because this is something I always ask MSPs when I'm talking with them, like, hey, I want to build a vCISO practice or I want to build a compliance practice. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, what is the reason? What are the signals? Tell me why you want to do this, right? And let's dig in and let's define kind of what are we seeing specifically. I mean, you could see, okay, well, I want to get into HIPAA because I know that everyone has healthcare requirements, right? But have you actually looked at your target market and your skills, and have your clients in the requests that your clients have, like if they're just checking the box and you're working with like maybe dentist's office, maybe that might not be the best type of vCISO offering because they don't have the budget or really even the appetite. They just want to do the bare minimum to get over the line and kind of roll the dice, right? So we have to understand like what they should be doing versus what they are going to do and what pain points do they want to solve, right? So I think we talked about segmentation last week, and this is a little bit of a throwback to that, is we had that question of what recurring need or request are your clients expressing? Like, let's think about what they're asking you about and what they're trying to solve in their businesses. And then like we talked about, what are the market signals, right? Do we see specific opportunities with what people are asking? And this again goes back to having our ear to the ground in our clients' industries and understanding what they're saying as a collective group.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll say that sometimes we're hearing but not listening,
Mm-hmm.
and that way that clients might be expressing that need or
Yeah.
request might literally be the formula to the go to market
Well,
if we're paying attention, right? Because the way we understand or articulate this may have nothing to do with the way the client thinks they understand it.
that's very true. Yeah, and I'll save some of this for when we get down the road here. But yeah, we'll leave it at
Okay, so
that.
anything else to say here? Any questions, folks, as we go along? You know, if you have sort of any commentary or questions, drop the notes in the chat. I think we'd love to get your engagement here as we go through, so we don't miss any opportunity to discuss this in more
Yeah,
detail.
maybe we look at well, let's go to the next slide, and I think we can look at the actual worksheet about this, right? So we want to identify the target audience, right? So if we're saying we have a current client base that we want to go after first, what industries or what segment of our client base is best fit for that? And once we know that, we want to actually know who the personas are and that who are the decision makers and the influencers, right?
Which
So
may not be the same as your average, or your normal managed services offering, if that's something you're doing today. Like if you're
that's
not a
right.
security specialist, right?
You may so there's a perfect example of what we see in the community all the time is that vCISO services tend to be attractive to a lot of co-managed type of customers, right? Where they have an internal IT director who's helping drive some of the IT strategy, and they have a leadership team, and the IT director may not be the one making the final decision. It might be the CFO or something like that, but they're the ones that are going to bring you to the table, right? So you need to structure your messaging and ask them questions like, how does the business respond when you try to talk to them about cybersecurity? How do you get cybersecurity budget? Do you think the executives understand their cyber risk? No. Okay, well, our vCISO service is going to help you be your secret weapon and the bridge between executive and IT, and we're going to help you do that. That gets you through then to the CFO. And then when you talk to the CFO, it's all about, we're going to help you make the best decisions on your cybersecurity spend to maximize the ROI and the mileage on your budgetary dollars, right? So you have to understand those personas and make sure that the different pressures they feel from the frameworks and the business and everything else, that you're accounting for the messaging in those. And that's really what this go-to-market worksheet is intended to help you start doing, right?
And by the way, in the session 1 resources, there was a great appetite matrix or appetite sort of tracker, so that you could understand whether clients are the aptitude that they have or the desire that they have for this is in the right place, right? So
Yep.
keep that in mind as you go through the sessions. A lot of the stuff builds on the previous set of resources.
Yeah.
A couple comments. Michelle says recurring client need request is often team adoption and training. Do you find that maybe the unawareness of the cybersecurity path is one of the things that you should be kind of setting up earlier on in the normal MSP journey? Maybe you're not ready to offer vCISO, but you could be planting the seeds for the conversations down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think talking about things like resilience and risk are hyper important, whether or not you're offering vCISO, because that's those are the drivers for cybersecurity at a core level, right? People don't want cybersecurity. They don't want vCISO. They want the outcomes that those services get them, right? Namely resilience and risk reduction and, stabilizing the business in terms of revenue. So,
Yeah. And this hypothesis is important for exactly the reason Jeff just kind of articulated in his comments. There are so many options. It's not easy to focus on the business we want. And so this is kind of why this exercise is necessary.
yeah.
So you can judge a bit of like how you're going to go to market on this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do make the mistake of trying to do it for everybody at once because standardization. But this is maybe counterintuitive and counterproductive in many cases.
Right. Yeah. This graphic is something that Chris Ryan and I did. I think we talked about this when I was out in Florida recently at the CyberFox thing. But I thought it was important to bring to bear here because it's exactly what we're talking about. And that's when you think about your go-to-market, you want to start in a small, adjacent, easy to target circle and then work your way out in concentric rings, right? So close, the right current clients and expertise. So as we mentioned, building on last week, who are those clients that are predisposed to want these services? And then from this week, who are the personas, who are the people, what are the outcomes that they want? Because we're already delivering service to them or something close to that, right? Then we can start small and iterate and do just-in-time operations, create like an agile approach to the way we build this. Once we've got our feet, our skis, since we're talking skis today, once we've started getting on our skis and we're moving, right, then we can go to that mid-range. We could say, okay, we have a focus in manufacturing, but we see opportunity for HIPAA. How can we blend those? Oh, you know what? Medical manufacturing, that might be a good next step for us to get to, right? And then distant, now we have this expertise and we're going to go into biotech or pharma or things that are hyper desiring these services, but maybe we don't have the skills yet. So this is the way you work yourself out in those concentric rings.
Is this the point, Jesse, where you think we should bring up that workbook to talk about?
Let's take a look at that. Yep, but because I want to kind of we're talking a bit hypothetical here, and I want to dig down and actually give some like how do we execute on this, right?
All right, so we will share this. The link will be at that same URL. We haven't published this yet because we're going to also wrap up the slides and everything together, so you have access to all the bits and pieces. But let's talk about through this to some extent here.
So I love to use this for it's written in like brief summary in like a brief style. So you can actually create this and publish it to your MSP so everyone understands what's going on. That's another big piece of making sure we're communicating what we're doing here. But the first thing is that we talk about that scientific method is we want our hypothesis, right?
Let me bring the slides back up for a moment because we had kind of articulated a bit of how to think about that from a formulaic standpoint.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So there you go. So, so it's interesting because we can think these things, but there's something super powerful about writing it down and having everyone look at it because you might just be missing something. And the minute you put this down on paper, you're like, oh, wait, oh, yeah, that's not going to work or that's going to be a problem, right? So it's really important to go through the exercise of putting this stuff down, even if you think you may know it already. So really, this is the formula that I have you use. We believe that by offering, vCISO services or compliance as a service, we can help medical manufacturers achieve less risk, less downtime, which will result in more trust, going after more clients and predicting spend, so you're going to create that outcome. So you see it below. We believe that by offering a vCISO service, we can help manufacturing clients pass security audits faster, which will result in more renewals and higher retention, right? So that is kind of your thesis statement. And then you're going to work through the document to flesh that stuff out. And I'll just pause there because I know I'm getting excited here. I can hear my voice ramping up. So I'll let you jump in here, Luis.
No, I really just want to stress the importance of actually like pausing as you're, because we tend to shoot from the hip as MSPs. The smaller the business, in fact, the more we shoot from the hip. It's like when business owners come back from conferences, like we're going to use this tool now, and everybody's like organizational whiplash. So I think it's important to go through the process because especially with compliance. you really want to drive the
Yeah.
mindset of compliance
Yeah.
internally across the entire organization, and not
Hmm.
just have, this little thing that you're offering that somebody can go get a quote from a spreadsheet on your server.
Right.
So it really is sort of a different mindset.
Yeah. So really at that top list is that thesis is going to be that lead off statement. And then we're just going to talk about like let's be realistic with ourselves of how fast we can do this thing, right? Some different milestones that we want to hit. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, right? If you're using EOS, you're talking rocks or whatever else, right? That you want to start doing those things on. Um so once you have that down, now you're looking at that, like, let's say as a leadership team, everyone's kind of seeing the rough blueprint. They're like, oh, you know what, we're doing this. We can't do this. So it's going to help you plan, right? Then we want to talk about what are our primary goals that will define the success of that offer. So then we want to say, okay, we want to build this offer for scale. We want to target this industry. These are just examples that you're seeing here. You're going to choose these for your organization, but we're going to create our marketing plan. We're going to create a sustainable pipeline, and we're going to then end with a sustainable ARR. And these are all going to be goals, metrics, right? Okay, I love the OKR structure. So these are all built with OKR structures in them. So then you're going to line those up underneath, right? Now you've kind of got your working plan. Now this is super rough, but it's going to help you think through as an organization, how do we get there? And knowing what we know about other services that we've developed, what's the time frame and what's the lift look like to get each one of these things done? Now you're going to start to see it take shape as you build your go-to-market approach.
Yeah, I think a lot of the outcome of doing this exercise is really the buy-in you get organizationally.
That's right.
Because if you're a 10-person shop and maybe you have 2 or 3 people involved in doing this, because there is the actual vCISO or security person, but maybe they're not thinking through all the marketing components of it.
Yep.
And you need some support from the QBR folks, your account
Right.
manager or VCIOs or the owner who's doing a lot of these things. It helps uncover gaps where
Mhm.
people, need to all be on the same boat and rowing the same direction, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
um, we talk a lot about differentiation as being secondary to execution, but I think in something like this where it's fairly nascent to the industry, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are still kind of discovering how to go do something like a vCISO service.
Right.
Unlike offering managed services, which is now quite commoditized, and it's really about can you execute on the level of service that you promise, et cetera. There's not too many ways to differentiate other than just delivering a great service. Um, vCISO is a little bit different. I think there are ways that you position this. The way things are said by other competitors in your market might be different at this stage still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one of the really fun parts of my job is I get to constantly come up with new differentiators for new MSPs every day. I was just in a meeting yesterday and the guys came with their, after they've come back with their homework and we were coming together to talk about it. And they really blew my mind with what they're doing for their this one MSP. And it's just so cool for me to see that, right? Because they went through the exercise, they wrote this stuff down, they identified things about themselves, what I call their org DNA, their mission, vision, core values, and then they applied that back into their differentiators and their client type. And that all came to fruition to say, okay, now here's these really nice value pillars that we've developed, how we're different, how we meet our clients' needs. And now we can just hammer the messaging on those. And then our service can deliver on those. And it creates what this perfect virtuous circle between getting paid fairly to deliver value for the client.
I met with my friend who's an architect on Tuesday for lunch, and he literally broke out this like 3-piece folded piece of quotes that his IT provider gave him about some encryption project on the server. And he's like, I need to ask you about this because I don't understand any of this. So my point is that I think we make a ton of assumptions about what our clients understand, and the way
Yeah.
that we communicate and articulate these things is not exactly the way that they're understanding it. And so oddly, it was kind of wrapped in this whole conversation about AI. And I said, you know what? Just to show you the power that AI has here, I threw that quote into ChatGPT. It's like, I'm an architect. I'm not sure about all these things. What
Right.
kind of questions can I ask to better clarify the outcomes of this project around these things?
Right.
Are we going to have any downtime? Should I be worried about this? Is this a compliance challenge if we don't have the encryption or this or the other thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I threw it back at him, and it was literally 20 seconds of my time to show him how that works. And I think I literally blew his mind. He's like, oh my God, I never knew I could do this with AI, for example. But to my point of just the understanding the client has of how you position it, you got to field test this. You got to try it out. You got to find those clients that are very close to you, that are willing to give you a bit of that grace, to kind of experiment a little through the process,
Yeah.
so that you can design a really, really powerful statement and positioning for the other clients.
Yeah. So you see there, we do our competitive analysis, right? And I think it's fairly easy to do that right now. There's so many MSPs, right? So we can go find competitors. We know who our competitors are, right? And we can go say, are they doing this? Are they doing it better? Are they doing it worse? Are they doing it different? Past that, we do a simple SWOT analysis. And, this is all, working with your leadership team, or, the people involved in building the offer. And that's on the next page there.
Yeah.
But then you're going to talk about your differentiators, because at this point you should kind of understand where your strengths and your opportunities are, and those are your differentiators, right? How you're different, and those will lead into value pillars. So you're going to want your value pillars, your elevator pitch, your offer description, your elevator pitch, and then your detailed positioning statement, right? This is going to be the core of how you message and how you build all of your content, all of your marketing. It's the genesis of that. So once we've tested and this will be changing, right? But once we've tested our hypothesis with all that market research, with that competitive analysis, and say, okay, we feel like we have these differentiators, and now here's our value pillars. Now we're going to go test those, right? And this becomes this iterative process.
Yeah. Should we return to the slides at this point?
I was going to say, I know, like we should definitely get back to the slides, because I know we're halfway through right now, and I want to make sure we get through everything for everyone.
All right. So we were talking about crafting the hypothesis, and I think this is going to be the genesis of a lot of the other work that comes after in that worksheet. So keep this in mind as a critical starting point to formulate objectives.
Yeah. So we did kind of jump ahead, which is fine. I'd rather people see it in the sheet because it's going to make more sense. But we talked about this, right? The next thing is, once you've got your hypothesis, let's get clear on what it's going to take to do all these things. We talked about that, is that, what does success look like? Okay, we've signed up $1 million in vCISO ARR by the end of year one, right? I think that's a good goal that anyone can set. And I think most people on this call, if you could launch a new service and get it to 7 figures by the end of the first year, we'd all be pretty happy with that, right? So I think that's a good target to set. That's like a 2 or 3 person team that's delivering that at like 50 to 60% gross margins, right? Number of client signups. Again, you're going to create those OKR metrics for what that looks like. And then obviously the client's likely objectives. We talked about that again. Like, what does your target market want? What are they looking for in terms of resilience or anything else? Yeah. Thank you for defining that, Luis. I appreciate that.
Yeah, OKRs is a fantastic framework for those doing EOS. Actually, one of the things that we have found at ScalePad, we're EOS centric, but at a certain point, EOS is a little abstract with goals and KPIs. Mm-hmm. And so we found mixing a bit of the OKR framework, which is much more articulate in the specific outcomes and KPIs or results, was an interesting combination of frameworks. And so the OKRs are actually a great framework to also share with clients, because in the small business world, like 15, 20 person customers or 50 person customers, they may not be thinking in terms of these frameworks from a management perspective. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes they can, their eyes can be open to some new interesting opportunities there.
Yeah. And I again, this is a tangent, but I really do like OKRs because they're so dynamic, right? They're easy to change, and it's easy to get it up and working and start executing on it, right? And you can adjust them down the road. So I think they're nimble, which is good for MSPs.
This last bullet point, what are your clients' likely objectives? And this is maybe you're kind of just initially scratching the surface on whether you want to put this service or offering together, and you haven't actually had any conversations with clients at this stage. And so you might be guessing at this stage what their objectives are, but I think it's super important to align with how they perceive the outcomes, to play out in the long term, right?
Yeah, like what we talked about, like objective is, for a manufacturing company, never stop the lines, right? So how does our cybersecurity and vCISO program help them with those goals, right? It's an end to the means. They don't care about vCISO, or they don't care about encryption, to your point. They care about that the machines are always running and always profitable, right? And that's what we do. That's our North Star in that example.
Validating industry demand. And I think this is maybe a slippery slope one overall, because I think we can convince ourselves very easily that everybody needs this.
Yeah,
It's so obvious.
that's right.
Um, but I think it's important to go and prove the theory to
Hmm.
be true.
Yeah, we were chatting about this in the Canadian market, right, Luis? Is you guys have some cybersecurity recommendations, or it could almost be considered compliance. It probably compliance is coming as part of it. But as of right now, nobody's required to actually do it. So it's like we know everyone should be complying with this, but at the end of the day, if business owners aren't required to, they're not going to follow the every jot and tittle
Yeah.
of that standard, right?
There are things like in most industries, even in the US, there are some that just because you're in the industry, you already have to comply, almost self assess certain. And we get into the difference between actual compliance frameworks or
Yeah,
standards based things. And in Canada, things like PIPEDA, for example, which is the privacy
yeah,
PII type compliance framework. If you're a governmental agency or if you're in certain industries, you kind of have to do it even if nobody asks. Nobody's going to come and check and audit. But if there's an issue down the line and you weren't taking steps to be compliant or follow the best practice, then you'll be in hot water. Of course, insurance claims will be denied, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
So all the issues that come from not having that understanding and awareness become a bigger problem. So
yeah.
I think part of the challenge here is trying to understand if clients maybe are unaware of requirements that their industry has or
Yeah.
things that they've been like, oh, we'll do that when we need it type of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking. I was like, I know I had a conversation about this just recently. So I pulled up my LinkedIn messaging here, and a Canadian MSP I was chatting with, they said, we're just getting into compliance, haven't found our stride yet, but in Canada, there are rules, but nothing's 100% enforceable. So it's a bigger sales run. And so, I said, well, what we're seeing from our partners in the grid is that a focus on resilience and risk reduction around business outcomes and downtime and trust is having much more resonance across the board. And he said, oh, I like that.
Well,
So
yeah,
I'm like,
because those are like the
right,
core things about running a business that you can't like pretend to be running a business. Say we don't want to mitigate risk, right?
right,
Uh,
right.
but if what you're selling is the term compliance and it's not required,
Yeah.
then what the
Oh,
heck?
I don't need that. Yeah.
And so we have a whole slide about shifting the narrative. I think that'll be
Yeah. Yeah.
very timely. But I think to that point, it's maybe time for poll number two. And poll number two is this question: how consistent is your team when describing what's included in one of your services? Like, if you went to one of your help desk folks today and said, you know about the service that we offer, right? Do you know what it entails? And would they be able to articulate that well? And this is kind of signaling a few things that we'll talk about as we get this launched here. Session two, poll two. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I know this. When we first built our cybersecurity program over a decade ago at that first MSP where I was the CISO at, I know that was a major mistake that I made, was building an entire cybersecurity program and not really going around and educating everybody on exactly what that meant, right? So yeah, as you mentioned, help desks, even TAMs were like struggling to be like, well, how does this help? Like, what does this do? And so, this learning had to go back and re-educate everybody. And once we did that, then all of a sudden, now they're bringing leads in like, hey, I just talked to this client and they're having X, Y, and Z problems. I think we should go talk to them about the vCISO service, right? And
Yeah.
it just, instead of becoming like a friction point in the organization, it became a teamwork thing and a culture thing in the organization. So it's a big shift.
And I think the point of this question is that if your client signals the desire or interest in some kind of vCISO or compliance, and the standard response from the help desk is, "Oh yeah, we got a compliance guy. I'll refer you to that," and they're not sort of in the mindset of compliance,
Right.
you may miss the opportunity to get the client excited about the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is why we're asking this question a bit. So let's we got 77%. Let's see what the results here look like.
Yeah. That's not a surprise, right? So the majority depends on who's talking to the client. Which, I think especially if we focus this question even further and said when talking about compliance, I think we might see almost everybody saying depends on who's talking. to the client,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, not uncommon. But again, that's part of why I think it's important if you develop this go to market and these value pillars, and your people have 4 short things they can say that does X, Y, and Z. That's real simple for everyone to say the same thing. And again, it's all marketing, right? So they're marketing to the client when they're talking to them about it.
Yeah. John, the link to session 2 downloads will be published shortly after today's session. So keep that URL and revisit that shortly after to find today's download. It'll have the presentation and it'll have the worksheet that we were sharing earlier as well. All right. So I think along that line of being able to map risk and assumptions, this is so critical. So your own team can identify opportunities as well. I think this is, when I hear MSP owners say, I wish more of my team behaved like a business owner, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because if they understand how to identify opportunities, then they can clearly pass that baton over to, hey, this client just expressed this interest and here's the signals, and we have that documented, and so it's easy for the team to understand when something needs to raise their hand and say this client's interested, right?
Right. Yeah, I think the whole thing about mapping risks and assumptions is so critical. And this really isn't lip service when Luis and I are talking about this, right? Of how important it is to get a plan together, and you can't wing this one, right? We have somebody who joined the power grid who, when they came to me, they said, "Hey, we've been offering vCISO services for a year, have sold 0, and have wasted almost 6 figures on product development and software and everything else," right? And that's like a dagger in my heart to hear that, because that's, unfortunately, somebody sold them that, hey, compliance is the way, right? But didn't give them the plan. So it's like, I'm here to pick up the pieces, of course, and we're going to get them on the right road, but like, let's avoid that. We want to map out our risks, and we want to make sure we think through what happens if we don't do this the right way, and take a sober look at it, right?
Yeah. It was so insightful. It was only recently on the MSP Confidential podcast. I had Emma Bookspan, a 20-year-old who's in the IT industry, and she actually made the comment of, like, you have to understand the cost of unwinding something as one of your risks that you look at when you're looking at putting a new service together, because a lot of people underestimate what it costs to unwind something that they just put together and go back to the way they were doing things before. There's a cost attached to that. It was often misrepresented or just not taken into account.
Highly insightful for a 20-year-old.
Yes, yes, indeed. Let's see. Will clients pay a premium? This is, the MSP value mindset maybe is an enemy here, because I think a lot of us have grown up saying, oh, we're trying to save you money, my clients won't pay for that, and we make a ton of assumptions here. Yeah. Because their business may have grown 10x, and their whole value system around risk and risk tolerance may have changed in that time frame, right?
Man, I couldn't agree more. Like, you think you're protecting your client by like not having this risk conversation with them, but really what you're doing at the end of the day is poisoning the well. Because if and when they do have a problem and you hadn't been clear with them on the risk, who are they going to blame? You. You've just assumed all of that risk, and you've put yourself in a scenario where you've almost been dishonest with your client, right? And not out of any sort of negative or malicious way, but I think ripping the Band-Aid off and having that conversation about risk is super important. So yeah, I can't stress that enough.
I really like Jeff's question in the chat. Depends on what premium means, and I'll give you my take, but I'd love to hear your take as a practitioner and Sherpa of this for MSPs. But in my mind, a lot of what we've done for years is simply position things at an hourly cost to clients, and sometimes we go fixed fee, but it's still kind of based on the estimate of number of hours going to spend on this. And I think that's a gross underrepresentation of the value the client receives in the case of compliance as a service for the most part. And so I think if you can shift the perspective to understand what is the value that the client is receiving by having a service in place, what is the risk that is mitigated, what are the losses that are stopgapped,
Yeah.
then I think that's what premium means, is because that takes a whole other shape of value. But your take on this, Jesse?
Yeah, I think about a premium. I mean, they'll pay like insurance premiums. I don't like comparing, by the way, cybersecurity to insurance. I think it cheapens the service. But what I will say is that we're in a consumption model economy. Everything is a service these days. So you think about how your prospects are buying everything else in their life. It's as a service or a consumption-based model based on what they need to solve a problem, right? So they're accustomed. You're almost fighting the zeitgeist by not doing that, and you're creating friction and like weirdly hard ways to purchase service. So all that to say is, what is a premium? It's, I'm going to solve this set of business problems for you, and it's going to cost this much per month. And I've structured that in a way that it's valuable to me because I can fix my costs and I know what it's going to take for me to deliver this service because I put clear edges on the service. And then it's going to provide value to you because you're going to get those outcomes. And people are willing to pay for outcomes. So they'll look at it. And if it's the right type of client, if you've done your marketing and your messaging and your qualification correctly, they're going to say, yep, these outcomes are worth this premium and I'm willing to pay it. And then it's the end of the conversation at that point.
Yeah, a couple of good follow-up questions in the chat too. Bob asks, what do you mean by ripping off the Band-Aid with regard to the risk conversation?
Yeah, I think going to a client and actually saying, hey, we want you to do a risk assessment and we're going to show you your risk. That's especially with legacy clients that maybe you haven't had security conversations with initially, that can be really difficult. So you're going to go to them and say, okay, you're at 50% risk, a risk number. Okay, we like to see clients at like 30%. They're going to say, well, I thought you were my IT provider. Didn't you have this? So you're going to have to go and kind of true up the conversation and maybe have a difficult conversation that we don't just have it, right? There's risk that you own. And so those can tend to be tough conversations with the client. So we avoid them because we're like, oh, we'll just try and fit some things in and help them up their security. But we haven't been clear with them on they do have risk. So by ripping the Band-Aid off, I mean going and doing the risk assessment, outlining clearly what they do have, and then having that maybe difficult conversation about here's where we are and here's where we need to be. But that distinction needs to happen to make sure that you're level setting the client relationship and operating from a frame of shared management.
Yeah. Let me interject quickly on shifting the narrative, which we kind of mentioned earlier, because you said go do a risk assessment. And I think one of the interesting things is it's fine for us to call it that, but I think the way the client hears it is that we're being graded. And I think it changes the dynamic when you can say, hey, we're going to collaboratively try to understand your risk better, and we're going to do a discovery. And so there's a number of these terms here that I think just as a mental exercise, ask yourselves, are we talking about these things in very technical MSP centric terminology, or are we bringing the client into the conversation and equation by making the terms a little bit more client friendly? Can consider that.
You could call it resilience planning. I like that one. That one seems to resonate well. Like we want to do resilience planning to make sure that we can smooth out the curves, right? The whole messaging there is we're in turbulent economic times, right? The economy's up and down. We may be headed into a recession. We don't know. We want to control what we can control. We can't control any of that. What can we control? We can smooth out those peaks and valleys and make sure that cyber doesn't snake bite us, right? So we can control making ourselves more resilient and creating and reducing the risk that would compound on top of these other things to create a perfect storm that could really harm our business.
Speaking of baggage, and the reason I have this slide is because I talk about this regularly. A lot of MSPs have traditionally gone to market by, oh, just forget about your technology. We take care of this for you, and kind of giving the client permission to abdicate all accountability and responsibility for IT. Yeah. And compliance or CAS or vCISO requires such a different level of involvement on the client's part that we have to break that cycle altogether, and we just need to bring them back into the conversation. So this is kind of why this comes up a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so we were talking about risk and assumptions. This is such a like a maybe understated flex point here, because
Yeah,
it's so easy to go and just build the big juggernaut of a service,
that's right.
and then not be able to sell it. Like you were telling the story of this client of this MSP a year
Yeah,
without making a single sale.
yeah,
Piloting is
yeah,
so important. I think with projects overall, piloting is a great strategy to reduce the perception of impact or risk to the client of starting
hmm,
something new, understanding how this is going to flow. And I think this is equally important for your team to understand, what does it take to actually be in this and take this to market and to fruition with clients, because I think there's many parts of this that you may not understand how it feels like and
yeah,
what level of effort's necessary, where the missing pieces and gaps
yeah,
are.
yeah. And it goes back to what we talked about in the first session, right? Of finding those what I call friendlies that say, hey, we're building this new service. It's valuable. You said that you want this. We're going to let you shape it. So we're going to give it to you first, and we're going to work with you to find out what's working, what's not, and you're going to very quickly get your team acclimated. Like, listen, we all have really smart, um, intelligent people that work for us, and they just kind of need to have, you if you don't throw them into the fire, they're going to figure it out. So you put them in this immersive kind of experience, and your team's going to show you how to, they're going to show you that what they're made of, and they're going to be able to execute on this, as you build it.
John Tryon's question: what would you consider a premium rate card? And his follow-up comment is that he's seeing commodity type pricing of vCISO services, which makes
Yeah,
it challenging to differentiate based on value-added services or
yeah,
experience. And I agree, that's true. I think this is part of the shift that we were talking about at the beginning.
that's right.
Of, if you're not already in the boardroom because the relationship with your clients is deep and significant, and you've earned that quote unquote trusted advisor status,
Mhm.
it's really difficult to just show up and suddenly be like, we want to be in the boardroom now so we can have this
Yeah,
vCISO conversation. That's going to take
yeah,
a little bit of a leap of faith in many cases.
yeah.
So you got to be building towards this type of relationship, and vCISO is kind of the thing that maybe consolidates or confirms it. But your comments on that, Jesse?
Yeah, so I agree. Like, so with current clients, especially ones that didn't come in based on our new messaging and our new kind of vCISO approach and risk approach to the market, they didn't come in keying off of we want these things. So yeah, there's a much longer trajectory. That's a different kind of go to market. As what I mentioned is kind of like this education, get you to do a risk assessment, have the conversation, position vCISO as a leader, and the need for risk led strategy. And that's just going to be a longer tail on that. But now, when you're talking about just premium, in the market, you're seeing other providers as commodity pricing, right? Well, they're down in that red ocean, so we don't want to do that. We want to talk about value, and that's why this go to market is so important, because we want to key in on value pillars and differentiators that speak to a specific client type's needs. I always go back to the example of SEC regulations in the U.S. So if you have two scopes of work, you go to an investment firm or a publicly traded company or anyone that's subject to SEC regulations, and you say, uh, "We'll help you." Your scope of work says, "We'll help you manage the risk program," and another person's scope of work says, "We'll help you match your cybersecurity governance program up to the SEC cybersecurity rules." Like, who's going to win that deal? Who do you think? Right?
Yeah, well,
You could
industry
be
specific.
double, probably.
Yeah.
And we have something in the Power Grid that I give people that's like a mind map that maps out all those specific things of the cybersecurity rules and says, here's how our vCISO program maps those. If you give that to someone and say, hey, go ask your provider, how are they doing that? Or this other person, how they're doing it, you're winning that deal, and you could be double, right? So that's what I'm talking about with the premium pricing. And we're seeing, from our community, we have about almost 50 MSPs in it now, but we're seeing like deal sizes from like on the low end, like the kind of starter package at like 3,500, all the way up to 12,000, 15,000 a month. Now that's for, co-managed larger companies. Average deal size is probably in between, I'd say 5 to 8,000 for what I'm seeing now. It is, as a general rule of thumb, for like a full-fledged vCISO engagement. So that's
Right.
just something to think about, pricing, where that's lining up.
So frameworks, and I think the main reason we wanted to just bring a few of these slides up is because I think this is going to be the foundational choice that you make in going to market and choosing a path for this.
Yeah.
Are you going to be in regulated industry with very strict frameworks, or are you going to be in a self-assessment type of situation, right? Anything to comment here, Jesse?
No, I think that the compliance is no longer optional, for certain industries. And then aligning you have to, the one thing I want to call out is at the very bottom, you can't sell compliance, right? So selling compliance is a losing strategy. That's where you get into that commodity, like, oh, it's managed compliance. And so that dentist's office that needs to have HIPAA compliance is willing to pay the commoditized provider $2,000 or $2,500, right? That's not what we're in the game to do, right? We're in the game to create business value, create enterprise value, and protect enterprise value through our managed vCISO program.
Yeah, love that. Go-to-market lever.
Yeah. So again, compliance frameworks are a go-to-market lever, right? So again, CMMC in the States right now is a big one. All of a sudden, so many manufacturers are subject to that, and they've been kicking the can down the road, just like business owners will do, because they haven't been forced to do it. Now the chickens are coming home to roost, right? There's my cybersec farm throw back there.
Perfect.
But here's the thing, right? So when you talk about, and then the SEC, it goes back to the SEC thing I was talking about earlier. When you can talk specifically and accurately about and demonstrate knowledge of the compliance framework in your marketing and your scopes of work and your conversation with the clients, and not only that, not just compliance understanding, but how that affects their business and how we seek to enable their business and kill two birds with one stone by creating business resilience while still maintaining a compliance standard, that becomes a powerful narrative. And that's part of your go-to-market, excuse me, what I just talked about, right?
Yeah. And so we were talking about sort of the slight difference between compliance-based or standards-based. This is, I think, a big part of that foundational choice. And once you've evaluated whether you want to go near, mid-range or far, I think this starts to paint a picture of which way you want to go. I'll give you an example. A lot of people are aligning with CIS as an example, just from a blast radius perspective. More conversations can be had around CIS because it's easier to adopt, less of a friction point with whether it's a requirement for them or not. Mm-hmm. And we have partners, for example, that have adopted CIS IG1 as their onboarding framework. They've dispensed with their, bespoke onboarding checklist and simply started to use CIS IG1 as the baseline for all clients across the board. And so this is now an internal compliance mindset at the MSP because everybody's thinking about it from that perspective. The client doesn't necessarily know, but as soon as they sort of signal interest or need, it's very easy to move them to IG2 or IG3 or introduce another framework or introduce the cross walk into something else like SOC 2 or ISO 27001 or whatever. So I think this is one of the powerful things of having this foundation really well thought of.
Yeah. So that's a great point. One comes to mind from many, many years ago. There was a trading firm that we were working with at the MSP doing vCISO services for them, and had them on IG1. And then it was year 2 of the program, and they're like, hey, we want to start implementing some custom developed applications to start serving our clients better by providing a custom client portal with trading information and stuff like that. So, okay, well, now we're in custom development territory. So we just bump them up to IG2, which has the controls for that. And then all of a sudden, we have a whole new set of initiatives for year 2. And we just keep rinsing and repeating and growing with that customer based on their business requirements, right? Because this was meeting those requirements.
Yeah. So I love this title. The right framework isn't actually about the framework. And it's downstream from the hypothesis. So you really have to take the time, figure out the hypothesis, and not just be on the bandwagon of HIPAA because, it sounds, like a big market opportunity or little revenue generator. You got to be able to deliver this, obviously. So,
yeah. If you pick your framework before your market, you're in the danger zone. You're getting into that, or like, oh, we'll do CMMC because there's a lot of need there. Jesse said there was a lot of need in that webinar.
Yeah. So talk to us through the danger zone a little bit, because I think that's a super relevant thing.
Yeah. So again, we've chosen this particular framework. Will the framework actually support the outcomes your clients care about? I see a lot of people that are just getting into this. We're going to do NIST because it's like the federal government uses it and it's the best. I'm like, well, hang on. Do your clients need NIST? Because that's a lot more work than CIS, as we just mentioned. CIS might be a better way to start, right? So you have to think about, and what do your clients really care about? They care about being more secure. So again, being pragmatic, what's the simplest way we can get that done? So that's, you got to think about your frameworks there. And then how well do you know the framework? How well can you scale it? We always have to be thinking about ourselves, right? We need to get that virtuous circle. We need to get results for our clients. We need results for ourselves as well. And then that speaks to the third bullet, is like, how much can we charge? Is there value there? Does the market want it? Are they willing to pay for it? Okay, we see opportunity. We've done our numbers. We've done our market research. We feel comfortable that we can start here with a few clients.
Yeah. And Michelle had a great follow-up. How do I, if I don't have an expert in this area? So we talked about that during session one, is like, where do people that do this come from? And they're sometimes come from unexpected places.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a whole conversation about that in session one. Definitely check that out.
Yeah.
The illusion of readiness, and I want to be cognizant about time here. We might go a little bit over, but I think it's worthwhile because there's a ton of interesting stuff here in just the last couple of slides. So stick around here. There's only a couple of slides left.
Yeah. I would say in session one, we actually have a personnel development plan that I'm giving away from the Power Grid to give you kind of a trajectory to start building those people. So go check that out. These are questions that I just want people to ask themselves, right? Let's take an honest look and let's slow down and say, how, we have to go look at our whole stack and how does it map to this framework? We don't want to go give a client an assessment and say you have all these deficiencies and they're like, how do we fix it? Oh, well, we don't know, right? You have these deficiencies. You need to at least get, so it's a bad place to be in. You don't want to be scrambling, and we're all familiar with that fire drill, right?
I think a mistake a lot of people make too is just suddenly start to talking about controls rather than productizing the controls, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's interesting because I always say we want to SaaSify this, and we want to productize it, right? We want to seek to give our clients a base package that serves the largest total addressable market with the least amount of products that they need to create that on-ramp for all of our clients that we can offer to and repeat and scale it. That's how we get scale. And then we have our add-ons or our feature packages. You're familiar with Microsoft licensing, right? So we have our E1, all the way up to E5, right? So that's why you need to think about this.
Yeah. Another way you achieve scale is by having a platform that'll help you do this with however many clients you're bringing into the fold. But as I've been saying, one of the reasons for this whole webinar series is that we understand the importance of having help with the execution side of this. And this is why Jesse has this Power Grid service, vCISO system. You can find more information about that by visiting powergrid.group. The link is there below. And then lastly, we have 4 more sessions coming in this series where we're unpacking more and more of these process building functions of getting your vCISO offering kind of thought about and ready for go to market. So the next one is on June 12th at the same time, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I've shared the link a couple times in the chat. I'll put it in there one more time. At this link, you'll be able to grab all the previous session videos, as well as hit a link to access the downloadable resources. The deck and the worksheet that we talked about earlier will be uploaded to that same page within the half hour here. Our team has to get it up onto the website and all that stuff. And we're typically making changes to the deck right up until the last minute. So we just had not previously set that up for download, but check back after 9:30 a.m. Pacific this morning and you'll see it there. Jesse, thanks again. So insightful. I think there's a lot of work that people can do. And if you're just tuning in for the first time on session 2 here, definitely go back and watch the session 1 on that, because it's going to give you a lot of the baseline stuff that you want to start evaluating before you start building out a plan for this. Any parting words?
No, thanks for having me. Super excited to continue this. And like I said, I think every MSP should have a vCISO program and be delivering the risk conversation to their clients. So that's what we're here to help you guys do.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Stay tuned for session 3 on June 12th. That link will take you to the registration page if you hadn't already signed up for it. We hope to see you then. And until then, continue building out this great vCISO offering, and we'll see you at the next one.
Later, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.